Niner Nation, what is going on? Welcome into week 12. It's crazy to think that the fantasy playoffs are only a couple of weeks away at this point, and hopefully your team is solid and has lots of depth, because welcome to Buyemageddon week number 1. 6 teams on a bye this week. Next week for Thanksgiving, no teams on a bye, and then Buyemageddon week number 2 will come the week after that with another 6 teams on a bye. And this week we are missing a ton of running backs that we're typically utilizing. Bijan Robinson, James Cook, Breece Hall, just to name a few. And if you've been using Alvin Kamara and Chase Brown, your lineup is going to be missing some depth this week as well. So this may be the most important running back video that you have watched all season long. So make sure you hit that like button and subscribe right now. Thursday night football this week, we're gonna see one of those classic AFC North battles with Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Cleveland is currently allowing the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to the running back position. And once again, Jaylen Warren continues to be misused by the Steelers. This guy needs to start seeing more touches. He has shown consistently over the past 2 years, he is more efficient than what Najee Harris is. And in a matchup like this, you really need to do some things with him to try and utilize him out of the backfield and keep the Cleveland defense on their toes. But he's gonna have to be a high risk. I just can't trust what I've seen from him recently, given his usage in the game plan so far. I would love for that to change this week, but Najee Harris played double the amount of snaps as Jaylen Warren last week. So he's a little bit safer based on the volume alone. Nick Chubb had a fantastic matchup last week against New Orleans, but unfortunately, Cleveland just couldn't keep the game close, and Nick Chubb was basically phased out of it. Overall, not a bad game, just in terms of making sure that he continues to progress after coming back from that awful knee injury last season. But this week against Pittsburgh is going to be super tough. Pittsburgh is allowing the 6th fewest rushing yards and 10th fewest fantasy points per game to the running back position. So the floor that we've seen with Nick Chubb recently, you're probably going to be looking at a little bit lower floor than that. And the ceiling that we haven't been able to find probably doesn't show up in this matchup either. All indications are that Aaron Jones was not at 100% last week, and he was limited all week in practice. Then he tried to play, and it showed up there as well. Cam Akers, he got a few extra touches this week, and maybe that happens going up against Chicago, which is a pretty favorable matchup on the ground. Now, the Bears don't give up a ton through the passing game, so running the ball this week with Cam Akers and Aaron Jones is definitely a must for Minnesota. But how healthy will Aaron Jones be? We'll need to monitor that throughout the week. Minnesota can't really do a whole lot to stop the pass right now with their secondary, but they absolutely can shut down the run, and there's an opportunity for them to shut down DeAndre Swift this week. Minnesota is currently allowing the 2nd fewest rushing yards and rushing touchdowns to running backs, while also allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points to the running back position. And over on Underdog right now, they have DeAndre Swift's projection set at 61.5 rushing yards. And you know what? I'm going to go lower than that projection. I don't love this matchup going up against Minnesota, and I think it could really, really hurt DeAndre Swift. Now, he had 71 yards and a touchdown last week against Green Bay, but in the 2 matchups prior to that, which were pretty favorable matchups, he couldn't even cross 60 rushing yards. And now that we have a much more difficult one on our hands, I'm going to be wary about what DeAndre Swift will actually do this week. And there may be no better time to be playing these pick'ems than right now with us, because over the last 2 weeks, I have made 15 out of 20 correct calls on the pick'ems that I include in these videos. But on top of that, we're hitting on the pick'ems that we're posting for our members only in our Discord channel. So you really should think about getting signed up over on Underdog and potentially becoming a member today. If you hit that blue join button down below and join the $10 tier, then you're going to start getting access to all of our pick'ems that we're absolutely smashing right now. Another big week for both David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs against Jacksonville, and now they're going to get a great opportunity once again against Indianapolis, who is allowing the 4th most rushing yards on the season to opposing running backs. And not only will both of these guys have a really great shot at putting up some serious yards on the ground this weekend, but they've got a great shot at finding the end zone once again as well. David Montgomery, a super safe play for you once again. And you probably shouldn't be asking me in the comments section if you're going to be starting David Montgomery, because the answer is almost going to be absolutely yes every single time. And Jahmyr Gibbs, a lot of upside as always. The big playability will show out against Indianapolis. And over on Underdog right now, his current projection is set at 69.5 rushing yards. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs missed out on my pick'em by 1 freaking yard last week. And I get it. They were absolutely blowing out Jacksonville. He would have had way more carries and smashed the over had he not been pulled with so much time left in the fourth quarter. It is what it is. But we're going to go back to it this week, and I'm going to go higher once again because I feel like he's definitely going to go over against this Indianapolis team. 2 weeks ago, Detroit gave up a rushing touchdown to Joe Mixon and then made him irrelevant for the rest of the game. Travis Etienne basically did nothing this past week against Detroit. Now, losing Alex Anzalone is not great for this defense. He does a lot to not only help in the pass game, but the run game as well. So that might be felt by the defense a little bit this week, and Jonathan Taylor may be able to take advantage of it. Detroit's run defense has been fantastic so far this season, but going up against JT, it could be a little bit more vulnerable than what we would like. I see a ton of potential for the running backs in the New England and Miami matchup because this matchup for both Stevenson and Achane has a lot of promise. This Miami defense is still inside the top 10 most touchdowns and fantasy points allowed to the running back position this late in the season. Even though their pass defense has been really solid, they're having trouble on the ground. And the last time these two teams met up, Stevenson ran for 89 yards and a touchdown. I could see some similar numbers this week, and I really like his potential. The sky's the limit for De'Von Achane this week as well. This New England defense right now is allowing the 3rd most rushing yards and 7th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. And De'Von Achane has been a top 6 running back in 3 of his last 4 games since Tua came back from his concussion. De'Von Achane, we are firing up this week, and his projection over on Underdog right now, 66.5 rushing yards. Go get it right now. Don't wait. Head over to Underdog, hit higher, put it in a ticket, absolutely clean up with it. I really want to like Bucky Irving in this matchup, and this week with all the buys, you may not have any other choices out there. Bucky Irving may be one of your guys, and I really hope that he gets the potential with enough volume in this matchup to give you some solid RB2 numbers. But Rachaad White he continues to lurk there. He is being utilized in the passing game a little bit more, it feels like, but he's still being utilized on the ground too. It feels like these guys are a little bit more balanced than what I would want right now. If you could tell me Bucky Irving was going to get 65% of the running back snaps this week, I would be on him for a potential low-risk play. And with Mike Evans coming back, can we really trust that Rachaad White is going to see some decent targets once again? It just feels way too volatile to have a ton of faith in either of these guys giving you the type of upside that you need this week to win. They could give you a decent floor, but I just don't love it. This isn't the best matchup for Tyrone Tracy this week, but he's clearly the #1 running back on this team, and he is a guy that's been playing well enough that he should be considered at least an RB2 option for your team with so many buys. He has at least 100 rushing yards in 3 of his last 6 games, and he's ran for 3 touchdowns during that span as well. He's getting a decent amount of volume, he's got some pretty good efficiency to go with it, and he's scoring some touchdowns. Not the best matchup this week, so maybe his ceiling should be a little bit lower, but give me #1 running backs all the time. If you're a Rico Dowdle fan, then rejoice because it's your week going up against the Washington Commanders. They currently allow the most rushing yards to opposing running backs, and then they're inside the top 3 most touchdowns and fantasy points allowed to the running back position as well. When you have such a great matchup in a week where you have so many buys and so many running backs missing, you got to look at a guy like Rico Dowdle. And even though he hasn't given you a ton to root for this season, This week, he's a low risk because of the matchup and his clear RB1 status. Brian Robinson Jr. returned from his hamstring injury this past week and what was a pretty tough matchup and looked really, really good. And now he's getting a better matchup going up against the Dallas Cowboys. His current projection over on Underdog is only 62.5 rushing yards right now, which makes no sense to me because he has crossed that in each of his last 3 games. So you know what? I'm going to go all on board with Brian Robinson this week, and I'm going to also make him my Manscaped must-start player at the running back position. And with the holidays right around the corner, I'm sure you're looking for presents and stocking stuffers for everyone around you, and Manscaped can definitely help out with that. Head on over to manscaped.com, use code word headliners20 at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. They've got so many awesome tools over there that you won't have any issues finding something for everyone in your life. And for Austin Ekeler, I don't think he's going to be needed in the passing game this week the way he was last week. The wide receivers were struggling and locked down, so they went to Ekeler a little bit more often. Against Dallas, they may not need to do that, so unfortunately, his ceiling isn't anywhere near it was last week. This was going to be a fantastic matchup for Kareem Hunt against the Carolina Panthers this week, but it sounds like Isaiah Pacheco has a realistic shot of returning. Nothing's been guaranteed as of yet, but late last week it was said that more than likely he would be able to return this week, and things can change throughout practice. So if we find out later on that no, Pacheco isn't going to be quite ready to go, then Kareem Hunt becomes a low risk option for you with a really high floor and a really high ceiling. If both guys end up playing, I wouldn't be shocked if we see a near 50-50 snap share, with both of them having a decent floor, some touchdown potential, but not a whole lot of ceiling. Chuba Hubbard has been fantastic this season, and for those of you that used a late round pick on him, he definitely has returned all of that value and then some. We do need to be just a tad bit concerned about Jonathan Brooks returning at some point in time and taking some of those snaps away from Chuba Hubbard, but he's not going to take enough snaps away to make Chuba Hubbard completely irrelevant. However, matchups like this could, because Kansas City is allowing the fewest rushing yards and fantasy points per game to opposing running backs right now. So while you probably have to play Chuba Hubbard this week because of all the buys, I wouldn't expect a whole lot out of him. We know Tennessee wants to stay balanced. We know they want to run the football, and Tony Pollard has been pretty good this season. He's been a consistent RB2, not a whole lot of upside, but enough to start him every single week. But this matchup against Houston is not one where I would need to be relying on Tony Pollard, because the ceiling that hasn't been there all season probably isn't showing up in this matchup going up against Houston, especially if Tennessee is getting blown up in the first half, because if that ends up happening, Tony Pollard is basically going to be irrelevant the rest of the game. The Tennessee defense is allowing the 5th fewest rushing yards on the season. I don't care. It's Joe Mixon. Mixon, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry are the cream of the crop right now at the running back position for fantasy football. Joe Mixon, it doesn't matter who they are playing, he's got a chance to score and put up some decent numbers. I don't even know what to say about the Denver backfield at this point. Javonte Williams will have a really good game in a matchup that we didn't expect him to, and then he just disappears in better matchups over the next couple of weeks. And then Audric Estime was supposed to end up getting more touches. He didn't. Then he did. Javonte Williams wasn't even used. And then last week, Javonte Williams is the lead running back. I mean, you can see where I'm coming from, right? If you're trying to rely on any of the Denver running backs at any point in time, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. If you're looking for a running back to flex this week, Alexander Mattison may not be your best bet, but one thing I can say about him is his potential in the passing game, because Denver is at the top of the league for most receiving yards allowed to the running back position. So because of that, Alexander Mattison's work in the passing game, especially considering the fact that Jakobi Meyers and Trey Tucker could end up being shut down, could give you a little bit of life if your lineup isn't looking all that great this week. He's still extremely risky, and I don't know if I expect him to go too high with the ceiling, but he could help. Since making his way back onto the field, Christian McCaffrey has been the RB11 and RB16. Maybe not the high-end RB1 numbers that we're used to, but those are still fantasy viable. And this week, going up against Green Bay, he's a low risk for me. He's going to be used in the passing game, he's going to be used on the ground, and he definitely has a solid floor once again. There have been a lot of people upset with Josh Jacobs, but he just finished as the RB5, and now he has 2 RB1 performances over the last 3 weeks. He's provided you with a solid floor all season long. This matchup, he's more of a medium risk because San Francisco does do a decent job of limiting overall volume to the running back position. But scoring a touchdown, if Jordan Love can get him in the red zone, could absolutely help that ceiling out. I really want to love James Conner this week. Right now, Seattle is allowing the 5th most rushing yards to opposing running backs. And Conner is definitely the RB1 in Arizona, but he doesn't feel like he has the type of upside that we've been used to. I think he has a solid floor, but I don't know if he's going to get enough attempts to really push himself towards that top tier RB1 status. He could find himself maybe RB16 through RB14. Definitely the matchup and the volume have that potential. And if he gets a touchdown, maybe RB12 area, but just outside of that, I haven't really seen the ceiling this season that I was hoping for. The one issue we've had with Kenneth Walker this season is that the efficiency that he was so good at the last couple of years has really disappeared now. And because of that, unfortunately, he hasn't really been able to reach the ceiling that we need from him. But the matchup that he had last week was way tougher than this week's matchup, and he still found the end zone. So for me, that's really what I'm hoping for. A decent amount of touches, a decent amount of yards, and a touchdown. I don't know if there's really a ton to discuss in this matchup. Kyren Williams and Saquon Barkley are starting for you no matter what. Barkley has over 100 rushing yards in 4 of his last 5 games. And in 3 of those games, he's gone over 140 rushing yards. He's one of, if not the safest running back in all of football right now. We all know that we are starting Kyren Williams this week, but he's on a little bit of a cold streak right now. He hasn't been able to find the end zone as of recent, and we really need him to in this matchup here. Philadelphia has been great against the run this season, and Kyren Williams may not have the ceiling that we need based on rushing yards alone. He's going to have to find the end zone to not only help with that ceiling, but help establish a decent floor this week as well. The LA Chargers are allowing the fewest fantasy points per game and the fewest rushing touchdowns to running backs right now. And we've seen Derrick Henry in this same type of position. A tough matchup, but a super solid floor nonetheless. This offense can move the football, and they can get down in the red zone where Derrick Henry can score. He has at least 1 touchdown in every single game this season, and he has scored a rushing touchdown in all but 1 game. More than likely, he finds the end zone this week, but his numbers from last week when he was the RB22 are his floor. Those are great floor numbers, and I'll take that every day of the week, knowing that he still has a whole lot of upside to go with it. J.K. Dobbins this week, highly touchdown dependent. We're going to need to find the end zone with him to truly give us a decent fantasy day. I'm not 100% sold on him giving us much more than maybe 60 rushing yards, and if he doesn't find the end zone, 6 fantasy points just isn't going to cut it because he's not going to do a whole lot in the passing game either. He's going to need to find the end zone. Against this defense, they can move the ball through the air. The Chargers can get into the red zone, and absolutely J.K. Dobbins can score, but that still is going to mean he's very risky for me. Well, Headliner Nation, there you have it. Shorter video this week, 6 teams on a bye, so not as nearly as many matchups that we need to cover, but hopefully this video is going to help you get your lineup set. We're going to be missing some top tier running backs this week, and because of that, we might have to dig a little bit deeper than what we're used to. Hopefully everybody out there is seeing a lot of success this season. Playoffs are right around the corner, so you're not going to want to miss any of the content that we have the rest of the year. So hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here, and turn on those bell notifications so anytime we drop new content, you'll know about it right away. But Headliner Nation, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.